You going to join them?
No, I'm gonna sit this one out.
Fair enough. Want to make an educational video?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Welcome back, Birchouse friends. Have you ever seen those kind of dorky looking caps that people wear in medieval art? You know, the stereotypical headpiece for peasants and pop culture, and wondered why such mid-looking headwear was so popular? Let's talk about it. Strap in, kids, because this is going to be a wild journey. Now, this is a coif, or a coif, and at its most basic level, it's a close-fitting cap that was incredibly popular during the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. But we'll circle back to that shortly. Let's talk about a few other coifs. Here, we have a very different type of coif, the arming coif. You see, there's a problem with medieval helmets. Putting a steel pot on your head is a good way to keep from getting cut by a sword, but it does nothing for the shock and percussive damage of said sword blow. And Lord help you if you're struck by a weapon that is specifically built to ring your bell. Anyway, the arming coif is a piece of quilted headwear that adds a level of soft armor under your helmet, adding a protective cushion between you and your helmet, as well as keeping the helmet tight to your head. But Birchouse, you ask, will it raise my armor stats? Yes, a little. But for an even better buff, allow me to suggest the chainmail coif. That's right, a coif for every occasion. The chainmail coif is a hood of interlocking rings worn between the arming coif and your helmet, offering a really versatile and sturdy defense for all manner of sharp and pointy threats when the boys come out to play. Still, someone is definitely going to get their eye poked out, so, you win some, you lose some. But what is important is that these two coifs and a helmet make up an armor system that is both elegant in its simplicity as it is practical and functional. Now that is all well and good, but this video was supposed to be about the coif as a fashion statement. The goofy little cap with the ear flaps that make everyone look like a medieval Ralphie. We see it worn by both the upper and lower class, worn by itself and under other headwear, and worn across European continent over multiple eras. So why was this unassuming piece of headwear so ubiquitous? Well, it turns out one of the primary factors for its popularity comes from the fear of every parent of an elementary school-age child. You know him, you hate him, Pediculus humanus capitis, more commonly known as head lice. That's right. Among the many reasons to be grateful for being born in this century is that lice were simply just a part of life until the 20th century, when humanity gained significant control with better medical and scientific understanding, modern insecticides, and more effective methods of management. Now, some of the earliest writings about lice are detailed in Isidore de Seville's Etymologies, a 20-book encyclopedia of sorts written somewhere between 615 and 636. In Book 12, under a section labeled Vermin of the Flesh, Seville describes lice as small creatures that infest human bodies, and labels them as pediculi, believing that lice were born of moisture and sweat on the skin. In the 12th century, we find the Trotula, a medieval book on women's health. Interestingly, it is partly written by a female physician of the era, Trota from Salerno. The Trotula features remedies for lice, suggesting a mixture of ash and oil for the armpits and pubic region, and a concoction of aloe, mercury, and incense for head lice. We find mercury is often cited in lice remedies across the medieval timeline. I wouldn't recommend it the next time young Timmy brings home the little critters from kindergarten, but I suppose offing yourself with mercury poison would indeed fix the lice problem. Now, we find lice pop up again in the Lilium Medicinae, a 1305 medical text by Bernard de Gordon, where he blames lice infestation on phlegmatic and melancholic foods. We jump over to the 15th century, we can find a humorous account by the prior Caesarius Heisterbach. He recounts the tale of a knight who is reluctant to become a monk because, and I quote, "the lice that infest your robes." To which Caesarius admits, and this is real, the woolen cloth does harbor a quantity of vermin. Charming. Even into the 18th century, it was a common practice to send in your powdered wig from time to time to be deloused. Let me say that again. A real job you could have at the time of the American Revolution, colonialism, Mozart, and the invention of vaccines would be to clean and exterminate lice in rich folks' wigs. The next time you are watching Hamilton and you start to feel itchy, you're welcome. To better put in perspective how much lice have been part of the human existence, we have found lice combs in archaeological finds across cultures and in every single century since at least 1700 BC. That is near 4,000 years of lice combs. So coming back to the topic at hand, what does the coif have to do with lice? Well, with its close-fitting shape, it worked as a deterrent against the little critters and helped stave off transmission, making the coif a common, if not necessary, piece of clothing for everyday wear, and even at night as some people wore them to bed. It probably wasn't very effective, but with little recourse, medieval folks turned to any solution. It is far better than mercury. So the next time you're checking out that hunk with the luscious locks in your favorite medieval fantasy, just know they are riddled with lice. And the common peasant, with his silly little coif, might just be smarter, wiser, and definitely less itchy. What? Fuck.